People say love is unconditional, but in my house, it was a currency I could never quite afford. At 33, sitting alone in my cap and gown while my family celebrated my brother across town, I finally understood the difference between a mistake and a choice. They didn't just forget my graduation, they erased it. So, I decided to return the favor. I didn't scream or fight. I simply became someone they could never find again. The fluorescent lights of the regional logistics office hummed with a sound that felt like a headache waiting to happen. It was 6 in the evening on a Tuesday, and most of the account managers had already clocked out, leaving behind the stale smell of coffee and the quiet whir of cooling hard drives. I sat at my desk, rubbing the space between my eyebrows, staring at a spreadsheet that refused to balance. 33 years old. That was the number that kept circling my mind. 33. Most people graduated college at 22. They threw their caps in the air before they had ever filed a tax return or felt the crushing weight of a deductible. I was doing this backward. I was finishing a degree in business administration while managing a shipping fleet for the entire tri-state area. Squeezing homework into lunch breaks and waking up at 4 in the morning to write papers on supply chain economics. I saved the spreadsheet, shut down the computer, and grabbed my bag. The heavy textbook inside thumped against my hip as I walked to the elevator. It was a physical reminder of the last 4 years. I was tired. I was bone-deep, soul-heavy tired. But underneath the exhaustion, there was a small, flickering flame of pride I kept cupped with my hands so the wind wouldn't blow it out. I was finally done. In 3 days, I would walk across a stage at the State University satellite campus. I would shake a hand, take a scroll, and officially become Lydia Griffin, Bachelor of Science. It did not mean I would get a raise. It did not mean I would suddenly become rich, but it meant I had finished something I started. Despite the noise, despite the delays, despite the way my family liked to remind me that I was the one who always did things the hard way, I got into my car and checked my phone before driving home. I opened the group chat labeled Griffin Family. It had been silent for 6 hours. I scrolled up to the message I had sent 3 months ago. It was a screenshot of the university website with the date and time circled in bright red. Graduation is May 15th at 10 in the morning. I had written, I know it is a drive, so I am happy to book a motel for everyone for the night before. My treat. Please come. My mother had replied with 3 emojis, a party popper, a thumbs up, and a smiley face. No words, just the cartoons. I scrolled down. 2 weeks ago. I sent a reminder. Just checking if you guys need the address again. I bought the tickets. I have 4 reserved in the front section. My brother, Mark, had replied, cool. My sister, Jenna, had liked the message. My father had not responded. But that was normal. He treated text messages like unsolicited mail. He read them and threw them away mentally. I put the phone down and started the engine. The silence in the chat made me nervous. In the Griffin house, silence was never just peace. Silence was usually the water receding before a tsunami. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that for once, just this once, they would show up. They would sit in the folding chairs. They would clap. My mother would maybe take a picture and put it on Facebook with a caption that did not have a backhanded compliment in it. Just focus on the finish line, I whispered to the empty car. 2 days before the ceremony, my phone rang while I was steaming my gown in the living room of my apartment. It was Jenna. Hey, she said. Her voice was tight, pitched up an octave. It was her something is wrong voice. I turned off the steamer. What is it? Is everyone okay? It is Mom and Dad, she said. She sounded breathless. They went to pay for the catering for Mark's promotion thing next week, and the card declined. The bank froze the main account. Dad is freaking out. He is shouting at the customer service rep on the speakerphone right now. My stomach dropped. Money was the third rail in our family. It was always tight, always mysterious, and always a source of screaming matches. What do you mean, froze? I asked. Like a fraud alert? I do not know, Jenna said. She sounded like she was crying. They are saying something about a lien or an overdraft. but Dad swears he deposited the check. It is a mess. Lydia. Mom is in the bedroom crying because she thinks they are going to lose the credit rating she just built back up. I looked at the black gown hanging on the doorframe. The velvet stripes on the sleeves looked dignified, heavy. Do you want me to wire them something? I asked. I felt the old reflex kick in, the reflex to fix it, the reflex to be the responsible one so they would stop yelling. I have some savings. I can transfer $2,000 if it helps clear the hold until they sort it out. No, Jenna said. The word was sharp. Immediate. No. Do not do that. Dad would be humiliated if he knew I called you. He does not want you involved. But if they are stuck, just leave it, Jenna said, her voice dropping to a whisper. I just wanted to vent. I'm going to lend them some cash from my stash. You just focus on your graduation thing. Just focus on walking. Are you sure? I asked. I can drive down tonight. No. Lydia, she said. Seriously, stay there. We will figure it out. See you Saturday. She hung up before I could argue. I stood there holding the steamer wand, water dripping onto the carpet. It felt odd. Usually, if there was a crisis, I was the first person they demanded money from. My father called me the Bank of Lydia when he was in a good mood and stingy when he was not. For Jenna to turn down money was unheard of. Maybe they were trying to protect me. I thought, the idea felt foreign, like a sweater that did not fit. Maybe they actually wanted me to have a stress-free weekend. I looked at the gown again. Maybe they were finally growing up. Graduation day was unseasonably hot. The gymnasium was packed with 3,000 people. The air thick with body heat, cheap perfume, and the roar of families shouting names. I sat in row G, seat 14. I was surrounded by 22-year-olds who were texting under their gowns and giggling about the champagne they had hidden in their cars. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, clutching the small program card. I had texted the family group chat at 8 in the morning, heading to the lineup now. Parking is in Lot B. It is the blue lot. See you soon? No one had replied. At 9:30, I texted again. Seating is open. Section 104. Let me know when you get there so I can wave. Nothing. At 10 o'clock, the music started. Pomp and Circumstance played on a loop. A slow, mournful march that usually made me tear up. Today, it just made my pulse hammer in my neck. I scanned the bleachers. Section 104 was to my left. I saw a sea of faces. I saw a large family holding up a sign that said, "We love you, Tyler." I saw a grandmother in a wheelchair waving a handkerchief. I saw empty spots, but I could not find my parents. I could not find Jenna's bright red hair. I could not find Mark's broad shoulders. Maybe they were late. My father was always late. He refused to use GPS and always underestimated traffic. They were probably arguing in the car right now. The speeches began. The dean of students talked about the future, about resilience, about the door opening to the rest of our lives. I barely heard him. I was checking my phone, which I had hidden in my sleeve. 10:30. No texts. 10:45. They started calling names. Adams, Baker, Carter. I refreshed the chat. Nothing. I opened Instagram. Maybe Jenna had posted a picture of them stuck in traffic. Worst luck ever. She would caption it. Missing Lydia's big day. I tapped on Jenna's story circle at the top of the feed. The image filled my screen. It was not a traffic jam. It was a table, a wooden table on a sunny deck overlooking water. I recognized the blue umbrellas immediately. It was the Lakeside Grill, a seafood restaurant 40 minutes in the opposite direction from the university. In the photo, my father was holding up a beer glass, his face flushed with laughter. My mother was smiling, looking at someone off camera. Mark was sitting at the head of the table, a plate of calamari in front of him, looking smug. The caption, in bright white letters, read, "Celebrating Mark's big promotion, Vice President of Sales. So proud of the golden boy." The timestamp in the corner said, 14 minutes ago. The world stopped. The sound of the gymnasium fell away, replaced by a high-pitched ringing in my ears, the applause, the names being called, the air conditioning. It all vanished. They were not late. They were not lost. They were eating calamari. Griffin, Lydia. The announcer's voice boomed. I stood up. I did not know how my legs worked, but they did. I walked to the stage. I felt like I was floating outside of my body. Watching a woman in a black gown walk toward a man in a funny hat, I shook the hand. I took the fake diploma cover. I smiled for the camera because I had paid $50 for the package. I walked off the stage and back to my seat. I sat down. I looked at the phone again. The picture was still there, celebrating Mark's big promotion. Mark had gotten a promotion to assistant manager at a car rental agency. It was a job he had started 3 months ago. I had spent 4 years working full-time and studying until my eyes burned to get this degree. They knew the date. I had sent it for months. I had offered to pay for the hotel. I sat there for the rest of the ceremony. 2 hours of names. And I did not move. I did not cry. I felt cold. I felt a coldness starting in my chest and spreading out to my fingertips, turning my skin into marble. When the ceremony ended, I walked to my car. I did not take off the gown. I did not take off the cap. I threw the empty diploma cover onto the passenger seat and drove. I did not drive to my apartment. I drove to my parents' house. It took an hour to get there. I drove the speed limit. I did not listen to the radio. I rehearsed what I would say, but the words kept dissolving in my mind, replaced by the image of that blue umbrella at the restaurant. I pulled into the driveway at 1 p.m. The driveway was full. My parents' SUV, Mark's truck, Jenna's sedan, they were all there. The house looked peaceful, the lawn freshly mowed. I got out of the car. My tassel swung against my cheek. I walked up the front steps and opened the door without knocking. They were in the kitchen. My mother was unpacking leftovers from styrofoam boxes. My father was leaning against the counter, scrolling on his phone. Mark was sitting at the table, spinning his keys. Jenna was pouring iced tea. The door shut behind me with a heavy click. They all looked up. For a second, nobody moved. They looked at me, in my gown, my cap, my heels, and their faces went through a synchronized spasm of confusion, then recognition, then something that looked like panic. "Oh," my mother said. She put a hand to her chest. "Lydia, you scared me." My father put his phone down on the counter, face down, immediately. "Hey, Lyd," Mark said. He sounded casual, but his eyes darted to the side. "What are you doing here?" I stood in the archway between the living room and the kitchen. I must have looked ridiculous, a grim reaper in academic regalia. "Today was graduation," I said. My voice sounded flat. It did not sound like me. It sounded like a recording. My mother's mouth opened. Then she laughed. A nervous, trilling sound. Oh my God, was that today? I thought that was next weekend. I stared at her. "I sent you the date 4 times. Mom, I sent you the address last week. I offered to book a motel." "No, you didn't," she said, shaking her head quickly. She turned to Jenna. "Did she? I never saw a text about a motel. You know I am terrible with dates. Lydia, you never told us the specific time." "I sent it Tuesday." I said. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I held it up. "Here's the text. Graduation is May 15th at 10 a.m. You replied with a party hat emoji." My mother waved her hand dismissively. "I reply to everything with emojis. That does not mean I read it properly. Why are you attacking me?" I looked at Jenna. "You knew? You called me 2 days ago. You told me to focus on walking." Jenna looked down at her iced tea. "I thought you meant walking the dog or something. I was stressed." "Lydia, you know how I get when I'm stressed." I was not listening to every little detail. The gaslighting was so clumsy, so lazy. It was almost insulting. They weren't even trying to make the lie believable. They were just throwing words at me like sand, hoping I would blink and look away. I looked at Mark. "And you?" Mark shrugged. He leaned back in his chair, the picture of relaxed arrogance. "Look, Lyd, honestly, we forgot. Okay? Shoot us. We had a lot going on. I just got promoted. We went out to celebrate. It was a spur-of-the-moment thing. It was not spur of the moment. I said, I saw the post. You were at the Lakeside Grill. That requires a reservation on a Saturday. You planned it. Mark's face hardened. He stood up. Why do you always have to make everything about yourself? He snapped. Excuse me? I asked. You come barging in here, dressed up like that, demanding everyone bow down to you, Mark said. His voice got louder. I finally get a win, okay? I finally get a promotion, and the family wanted to celebrate me for once. But no, Lydia has to ruin it because she didn't get enough attention. You are so jealous, it is pathetic. I stepped back. The accusation hit me like a physical slap. Jealous? Of an assistant manager job at a rental car kiosk? I graduated from college. I said, it took me 6 years. I worked full-time. I did this alone, and you are doing a great job of reminding us. My father said. He spoke for the first time. He was still leaning against the counter. His voice was cold, bored. You are acting like a child. Lydia, he said, making a scene, wearing that costume in the house. It is embarrassing. We forgot. Get over it. I looked around the room. I looked at the people who shared my DNA. I looked for a single crack in the armor, a single ounce of regret. There was none. There was only annoyance. They were annoyed that I had caught them. They were annoyed that I was interrupting their digestion of the celebratory lunch. My eyes fell on the counter next to my father. There was a white envelope. It was folded in half, as if someone had tried to shove it into a pocket and then thought better of it. On the front, written in my mother's looping cursive, was a name, Lydia. My family never misspelled my name. Never. It was Lydia with a YDIA. They knew that. I reached out and picked up the envelope. Hey, my father said, that is not for you. I opened it. Inside was a generic card with a picture of a sailboat. Smooth sailing, it said. Inside the card was a check. It was made out to Lydia Griffin. The amount was for $500, but it was the memo line that made my breath hitch. Payment 1 of 5. I looked up. What is this? My mother snatched the card from my hand. It is a gift, she shrieked. God, you are ungrateful. We were going to give it to you whenever you finally decided to show up, but you had to go snooping. You spelled my name wrong. I said, so? It is a typo, my mother yelled. She was red in the face now. You are impossible. Just leave. If you are going to stand there and judge us after we bought you a gift, just get out. I looked at the check in her hand. Payment 1 of 5. That wasn't a gift. That was a transaction. I looked at Jenna. She was biting her lip, looking at the hallway, refusing to meet my eyes. I looked at my father's phone, still face down. Something was wrong, deeply, structurally wrong. The forgotten graduation was not just negligence, it was a distraction. They were hiding something, and they had used Mark's lunch as a shield. Fine, I said. My voice was quiet now. I turned around. Where are you going? Mark called out. You are ruining the whole vibe. You know that? We were having a good day. I walked out the door. I walked down the steps. I got into my car. I did not look back. I drove back to my apartment in silence. The sun was setting, turning the sky a bruised purple. I walked up the 3 flights of stairs, unlocked my door, and finally took off the cap. I placed it on the kitchen table. I took off the gown and hung it over the back of a chair. I sat down on my sofa in my slip and stared at the wall. My phone buzzed. I picked it up. It was a text from the group chat. Way to ruin the family dinner. Lydia. Mark wrote, Mom is crying now. I hope you are happy. Then a message from my mother. I do not know who you think you are, marching in here and acting superior. We do so much for you. We can't handle your drama right now. Do not expect us to call you until you apologize. I read the line again. We can't handle your drama right now. My drama. My graduation was drama. My existence was drama. My desire to be seen was drama. I realized then that the forgetting wasn't random. It wasn't an accident. It was convenient. It was a way to put me back in my box. It was a way to ensure that even on the day I achieved something, I ended up feeling small. They did not just forget. They chose to be somewhere else. They chose Mark's promotion over my degree because Mark's promotion didn't threaten them. Mark was just like them. I was the one trying to leave. I stood up. I went to the kitchen table. I took the diploma cover. I opened it. It was empty, of course. The real diploma would come in the mail in 6 weeks, but the symbolism was there. I laid it flat on the table. It looked like a shield. I walked to my desk and picked up a spiral-bound notebook. I grabbed a black pen. I sat down in front of the empty diploma cover and opened the notebook to a fresh page. I wrote the date at the top, May 15th. Then I wrote 3 lines. My handwriting was jagged, pressing hard into the paper. Rule 1. No begging. I will never ask them to love me again. Rule 2. No arguing with lies. If they say the sky is green, I will not correct them. I will just walk away. Rule 3. No more letting anyone rewrite my reality. I know what happened today. I will not let them talk me out of it. I put the pen down. The apartment was quiet. For the first time in my life, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt safe. I blocked the group chat notifications. I went to the fridge and poured myself a glass of water. I drank it standing up, looking out the window at the streetlights flickering on below. I was Lydia Griffin. I had a degree. I had a job. And as of tonight, I had nothing left to lose. I went to bed, and for the first time in years, I slept without dreaming of them. The silence in my apartment was not empty. It was heavy, like a woolen blanket soaked in water. For 3 days, I did not answer my phone. I did not open the group chat. I watched the notifications stack up on my lock screen like unread newspapers on a porch. Mom, are you still pouting? Mark, seriously, grow up. Jenna, can you just call us? Dad is really mad. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee, scrolling back, not through the recent messages, but through the years. I went back to 2018. I went back to 2015. I was looking for data. I was looking for a pattern. There it was, clear as a fossil in stone. When I got my first promotion at the logistics firm, moving from the warehouse floor to the dispatch desk, I had called my mother. She had said, "That is great, honey, but don't let it go to your head. Mark is having such a hard time finding work right now. Maybe keep it quiet around him." When I bought my car, a sensible used sedan that I paid for with cash I saved for 2 years, my father had walked around it, kicked the tires, and said, "You could have given that money to the house fund. We need a new roof. But I guess you need your freedom." Every milestone I achieved was treated like a theft. Every time I climbed a rung on the ladder, they acted as if I had stolen the wood from their own floorboards. I put the phone down. The realization was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. They did not just forget my graduation because they were busy. They sabotaged it because my success made them feel small. If I was the fuck-up, the one who needed help, the one with the drama, then they were the saviors. But if I was competent, if I was independent, then I was a threat. My phone buzzed again. It was not a family member. It was Sarah, a woman from the accounts payable department at work. We weren't close, but we shared a cubicle wall and occasionally traded granola bars. "Hey," the text read, "I saw on the work calendar you were out for graduation. Did you do it? Are you a Bachelor of Science now?" I stared at the screen. A stranger remembered. I did. I typed back, "That is huge," she replied immediately. "A few of us are grabbing tacos at El Camino tonight. You should come. We will buy you a margarita. No excuses." My thumb hovered over the no. I wanted to hide. I wanted to curl up in my bed and pretend the world outside did not exist. But then I looked at my rule 1. No begging. Waiting for my family to celebrate me was a form of begging. "Okay," I typed. "I will be there at 7. El Camino was loud, smelling of grilled onions and cheap tequila. When I walked in, Sarah waved from a booth in the back. There were 3 other women there, Linda from HR, and 2 new hires whose names I barely knew. When I sat down, Sarah stood up and clinked her fork against her glass. "Attention, everyone," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "We are in the presence of a graduate. Lydia Griffin finished her degree while working 50 hours a week during peak shipping season." The women cheered. It wasn't a polite golf clap. It was loud, raucous applause. Linda reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I mean it," Linda said. "That is impressive." Lydia. "I dropped out twice. I know how hard that is. You should be incredibly proud." I felt a lump rise in my throat, hot and sharp. I looked at their faces. They were smiling. They weren't looking for a transactional angle. They weren't wondering how my degree affected their credit score or their ego. They were just happy for me. Sarah pushed a margarita toward me. "To Lydia," she said, "who is officially overqualified to sit next to me." We clinked glasses. The salt on the rim tasted like the ocean. I took a sip, and suddenly, I was crying. I didn't mean to. It just happened. The tears spilled over my lashes and dripped into the salsa. "Oh, honey," Sarah said, her face softening. "It is the relief, right? It is finally over." I nodded, unable to speak. I couldn't tell them that I was crying because they were being nicer to me in 5 minutes than my own mother had been in 5 years. I couldn't tell them that I was starving for this, just normal, boring kindness. "It is just a lot," I managed to say. "You did good," Linda said firmly. "You did good." I drank the margarita. I ate 3 tacos. I laughed at their jokes about the boss's toupee. And for 2 hours, I forgot that I was a disappointment. I felt like a person. 2 days later, my father called. I stared at the screen for 10 seconds before answering. I needed to test my new armor. "Hello?" I said. Not "Hi, Dad." Just "Hello." "Lydia," he said. His voice was different. It wasn't the bored, dismissive tone he had used in the kitchen. It was softer, rounder. It was his, "I need something" voice. "Lydia, look, your mother is a wreck. She has been crying for days. She thinks you hate her." I said nothing. I let the silence stretch out, taut as a wire. "We are sorry." "Okay," he said, the words rushing out. "We messed up the dates. It was a chaotic week. Mark's promotion, the bank thing, the stress. We dropped the ball. We want to make it up to you. Come over for dinner Sunday. Mom is making lasagna." I looked at the notebook open on my desk. Rule 2. No arguing with lies. "I am busy Sunday." I said, "Come on." "Lyd," he said, a hint of irritation bleeding through. "Don't be like this. We didn't think you would actually go through with the ceremony." To be honest, the world stopped spinning for a second. "What?" I asked. My voice was very quiet. He sighed. A heavy, static sound over the line. "Well, you have been taking those classes for forever. You stopped and started so many times. We just figured, I don't know, we figured you would push it back again, or that you didn't really care about the walking part. It is just a piece of paper, right? We didn't think you would actually drive all the way down there and do the pageant thing." I closed my eyes. There it was, the truth. It wasn't that they forgot the date. It was that they didn't believe in me. They had bet against me. They had assumed that Lydia, the one who struggled, the one who took 6 years, would fail at the finish line. They had planned their weekend around my failure, and when I succeeded, I inconvenienced them. "I see," I said. "So, Sunday?" he asked. "No." I said, "I have to go. Dad." I hung up before he could answer. I sat there, feeling the phone grow warm in my hand. They didn't think I would go through with it. That sentence replayed in my head like a broken record. It was the most honest thing he had ever said to me. The next piece of the puzzle came from an unlikely source. My cousin Ben. Ben was Mark's age, but he was the black sheep of the extended family because he had moved to Chicago and become a graphic designer, which my father considered not a real job. We rarely spoke, but he messaged me on Facebook that afternoon. "Hey, Lyd, saw the post about graduation. Congrats. Sorry I couldn't make it." "Heard it was a mess," I replied cautiously. "Thanks, Ben. Yeah, it was a bit of a mess. Classic Aunt Susan and Uncle Jerry," he wrote back. "Are they still freaking out about the foreclosure scare?" I frowned. Foreclosure? I thought it was just a frozen account. The typing bubbles appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. "Oh," Ben wrote, You don't know? My mom told me. Uncle Jerry co-signed a business loan for Mark 3 years ago. For that entrepreneurial venture Mark tried, the dropshipping thing. Apparently, Mark defaulted 6 months ago and hid the notices. The bank came after the house last week. That is why the accounts were frozen. They are garnishing everything. I stared at the screen. The air left my lungs. Mark? It was Mark. The family emergency that Jenna had called me about, the one that almost made me skip graduation, was caused by Mark. The promotion celebration at the lakeside restaurant was for Mark. The money they were hemorrhaging was for Mark. They were drowning to keep him afloat, and they were using me as the life raft they didn't mind puncturing. I remembered the check. Payment 1 of 5. $500. If they were being garnished, they didn't have $500 to give me as a gift. That money came from somewhere else. I felt a cold prickle of paranoia dance up my spine. I opened my laptop. I went to the credit bureau website. I had checked my score a year ago when I rented the apartment, and it had been fine. I logged in, answering the security questions with trembling fingers. What is the name of your first pet? What is your mother's maiden name? The dashboard loaded. My score had dropped 40 points. I clicked on recent activity. There was a hard inquiry dated May 12th, 3 days before graduation, the day Jenna called me in a panic. The inquiry was from a company called Quick Cash Lenders. I did not apply for a loan on May 12th. I was steaming my gown on May 12th. I clicked on Open Accounts. There it was. A new personal loan for $5,000. Opened on May 12th. Status: active. I sat back, my hands shaking so hard I had to grip the edge of the desk. They didn't just forget me, they used me. Jenna called me to distract me. Just focus on walking, she had said. She needed me busy. She needed me looking the other way while someone, Mark, Dad, Mom, used my social security number to take out a high-interest emergency loan to cover their debt. The misspelled name on the envelope: Lydia. The check for $500. Payment 1 of 5. They weren't giving me a gift. They were giving me a cut. They took $5,000 in my name and gave me $500 to keep me sweet, calling it a graduation present. I felt like I was going to throw up. The betrayal was so precise, so calculated. It wasn't a crime of passion. It was logistics. I printed the page. I printed the inquiry details. I printed the loan origin document. I put them in a folder. I did not call them. I did not scream. I felt the cold marble sensation spreading again. The next morning, I took a half day off work. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I drove to a strip mall on the south side of the city, to a storefront that said Community Legal Aid. I sat in a plastic chair for 40 minutes until a woman with gray hair and tired eyes called my name. Lydia Griffin? I followed her into a small office stacked high with files. I sat down and placed my folder on the desk. I think a family member stole my identity. I said, the lawyer, whose name was Mrs. Higgins, didn't look surprised. She looked resigned. She opened the folder. She looked at the credit report. She looked at the date. You live with them? She asked. No, I said. I have my own place, but they have all my info. They know my social. They have copies of my birth certificate. Mrs. Higgins nodded. It happens more than you think. Usually, it is to keep the lights on or pay off a bookie. Do you want to press charges? I hesitated. The question hung in the air. Press charges. That meant police. That meant handcuffs. That meant I would be the daughter who sent her family to jail. I don't know. I whispered. Mrs. Higgins took off her glasses. Look, you don't have to decide that today, but you have to stop the bleeding. If they did this once, they will do it again. A successful fraud is addictive. She slid a piece of paper across the desk. Here's what you do, she said. Step 1. Fraud alerts on all 3 bureaus. Step 2. Freeze your credit. No one opens a pack of gum in your name without a PIN number only you know. Step 3. File a police report for identity theft by unknown person. You don't have to name them, but you need the report number to dispute the debt with the lender. If you don't dispute it, you own it. I own it. I repeated. $5,000 plus interest, she said. And whatever else they open next week, I took the paper. I felt terrified. I was declaring war, but under the terror, I felt something else. I felt powerful. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting to their chaos. I was building a wall they couldn't climb. I will do it. I said, lock it down. Lydia, she said, and change your passwords. All of them. After the legal aid clinic, I didn't want to go home. I felt restless, my skin humming with adrenaline. I drove to the U-Store IT facility on the edge of town. My grandmother, my mother's mother, had died 2 years ago. She was the only person in the family who didn't look at me like I was a broken appliance. She had left me her collection of vintage cookbooks and a few boxes of knickknacks. But because my apartment was small, I kept them in a small 5x5 storage unit. I hadn't been there in 6 months. I pulled up to the gate and punched in my code. It beeped. Access denied. I frowned. I punched it in again. Access denied. I walked into the front office. The manager, a guy named Rick who always wore a vest, looked up from his computer. Hey, I said, I am locked out. Unit 402, Lydia Griffin. Rick looked at me, confused. Lydia? You were just here last week. You said you lost your code, so we reset it. My stomach dropped so fast I felt dizzy. I was not here last week, I said slowly. Rick spun his monitor around. Yeah, look, May 12th. A woman came in. Said she was Lydia Griffin. Had the key and everything. Said she forgot the gate code. She paid the account balance in cash for the next 3 months. May 12th, the same day as the loan. What did she look like? I asked. Rick shrugged. About your height, red hair, wore sunglasses. Jenna. Jenna had my spare key. I had given it to her a year ago when I was moving, in case I lost mine. I never asked for it back. Can you let me in? I asked. Please. Rick saw the look on my face. He typed something. Okay. I reset it to the default. Go ahead. I ran to the unit. I rolled up the metal door. The smell of dust and old lavender hit me. The boxes were moved. I knew exactly how I had left them. Stacked in a neat pyramid. Now, they were scattered. The tape on 2 of them had been sliced open. I fell to my knees and started digging. They had gone through the boxes of clothes. They had gone through the box of old yearbooks. What were they looking for? There was nothing valuable here. Grandma didn't have jewelry. She had books and quilts. I opened the box marked kitchen. The wooden recipe box was there. It was a beautiful thing. Hand-carved oak. I opened it. The index cards were still there. Apple pie, beef stew. But something looked wrong. The cards were sitting too high. I pulled the cards out. The bottom of the box was loose. I pressed on the corner, and the false bottom popped up. I gasped. Underneath the wood was a stack of envelopes. Blue stationery. My grandmother's handwriting. For Lydia. To be read when she is 30. For Lydia. To be read when she graduates. For Lydia. To be read when she is ready. They had been opened. The seals were broken. The paper inside was crinkled, as if someone had read them in a hurry and shoved them back. I pulled out the one marked, to be read when she graduates. I unfolded the paper. My hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. My dearest Lydia, if you are reading this, you did it. I knew you would. You have a spine of steel. My girl, even if this family tries to bend you into a paperclip, I am leaving this letter here because I do not trust your mother to give it to you. I have left you a small inheritance. It is not a fortune, but it is enough to start over. It is in a trust, separate from the family estate. The deed to the cabin in Potential and the savings bond are yours. Do not let them tell you otherwise. Your father knows about it. He promised me he would tell you when you turned 25, but I see the way he looks at money. Check the safety deposit box at First National. The key is taped to the back of the photo of us at the zoo. I dropped the letter, a cabin, a savings bond. They knew. They had known for years. My father had known since I was 25. That was 8 years ago. They had stolen my inheritance. They had kept it secret. And now, they were here, rummaging through my boxes, probably looking for the key. I looked at the photo of us at the zoo, framed on top of a stack of books. I turned it over. The back was ripped. The tape was there. The key was gone. Jenna had been here. She had taken the key. I sat on the cold concrete floor of the storage unit and screamed. It was a silent scream, my mouth open, my lungs heaving, but no sound came out. It was too big for sound. They had stolen my past. They had stolen my future. And they had gaslit me into thinking I was the burden. I drove home. I walked into my apartment. I locked the door. I put the chain on. I sat down on my sofa and dialed my mother's number. She answered on the second ring. "Lydia," she said. Her voice was bright. "Fake. Did you change your mind about Sunday? Dad says he talked to you. Who has been using my name?" I asked. I didn't yell. I spoke with the calm, flat affect of a judge delivering a sentence. There was a pause, a silence that stretched for 3 seconds. 4. "What are you talking about?" she asked. Her voice pitched up. I went to the storage unit. I said, "Jenna was there on May 12th. She took the key." "Mom, the key to the box at First National." Silence. Then, a rustling sound. "Lydia, you are being paranoid," she said. "Nobody was at your unit. You are imagining things. You have always had an active imagination." "Don't," I said. "Don't do it. I saw the credit report. I saw the loan. $5,000. Quick cash lenders. May 12th. My mother sighed. It was a sound of pure exasperation. We needed the money. "Lydia!" she snapped. The mask fell off completely. The sweet, confused mother was gone. In her place was the woman who looked at me like a resource to be mined. "We were going to lose the house," she said. "Mark made a mistake, a small mistake. We just needed a bridge loan. We were going to pay it back before you even noticed. Why do you have to dig? Why do you have to be so nosy? You forged my signature." I said, "That is a felony." "Oh, stop it," she said. "It is family. You help family. We raised you. We fed you. You owe us. And honestly, Lydia, you weren't using your credit for anything. You live in that tiny apartment. You drive that old car. Mark has a reputation to uphold." I sat there, listening to her justify stripping me for parts. "And Grandma's trust?" I asked. "The cabin? That belongs to the family," she hissed. "Grandma was senile when she wrote those letters. We used that money to pay for your braces. To pay for your car insurance when you were 16. It is gone, Lydia. It is all gone. So stop looking for it." She didn't deny it existed. She just claimed she had already spent it. "You are ungrateful," she said. "We protected you from knowing how broke we were. And this is how you repay us? By accusing your sister of theft?" I looked at the wall. I looked at the diploma cover on the table. "I am not accusing her." I said, "I am stating a fact. You are dead to us if you report this." My mother said, her voice was cold, "If you call the police on your brother or your sister, do not ever come back here. You will be alone. Lydia, no one will want you. You will be a bitter, lonely woman with a degree and no family." I listened to the threat. It was meant to terrify me. It was meant to make me fold, to say, "Okay, Mommy, I am sorry. I will pay the loan." But instead, it felt like a key turning in a lock. "You will be alone." I looked around my quiet apartment. I thought about Sarah and the margarita. I thought about the library. I thought about the silence that didn't hurt. I am already alone. I said, "I have been alone in this family for 30 years. I hung up the phone. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I felt a strange, crystalline clarity. I stood up. I went to my closet. I pulled out my suitcase. I wasn't just moving. I was vanishing. I packed my clothes. I packed my documents. I packed the recipe box with the letters. I sat down at my computer. I opened a new tab. How to legally change your name in a different state. Job transfers within logistics networks. Apartments for rent in Denver, in Austin, in Seattle. I was going to leave. I was going to change my name. I was going to cut the cord so thoroughly that they would never be able to pull on it again. I looked at the phone one last time. I powered it off. I took the SIM card out. I walked to the kitchen and dropped the tiny chip into the garbage disposal. I flipped the switch. The metal ground against metal. A harsh, final sound. Goodbye. Lydia. I whispered. I was ready to become someone else. The map of the United States was taped to my living room wall. It was a cheap, laminated thing I had bought at a gas station, the kind truckers used before GPS became God. I stared at it with a glass of wine in my hand, looking for a place that didn't hurt. I needed a city that was big enough to get lost in, but small enough to afford on a single income. I needed somewhere that didn't smell like the Atlantic Ocean or remind me of humid summers in the suburbs. My finger hovered over the Midwest, then drifted toward the Pacific Northwest, and finally landed on a spot in Oregon, Northbridge. It was a mid-sized city, the kind with 2 hospitals, a decent river walk, and a population that hovered around 100,000. It was boring. It was perfect. I went into work the next day and requested a meeting with my regional director. I had prepared a PowerPoint presentation, because that was the language we spoke in logistics. I pitched a transfer. I framed it as a strategic move to oversee the expansion of our less-than-truckload shipping lanes in the Pacific Territory. I used words like synergy, on-site management, and cost reduction. My boss, a man who cared more about quarterly bonuses than personal lives, didn't even ask why I wanted to go. He just looked at the projected savings and nodded. Approved. He said, "Can you be there in 3 weeks?" "I can be there in 2. I said, the physical act of leaving was surgical. I didn't sell my furniture. I donated it. I didn't want the old couch where I had cried over rejection texts. I didn't want the dining table where I had eaten frozen dinners alone on Thanksgiving. I packed only what fit in my car: my clothes, my books, my laptop, and the wooden recipe box I had rescued from the storage unit. I drove out of town at 4 a.m. I watched the skyline of the city where I was born fade in the rearview mirror, shrinking until it was just a smear of light against the darkness. I didn't play music. I just listened to the hum of the tires on the asphalt, the sound of distance accumulating between me and the people who shared my DNA. Northbridge was green. That was the first thing I noticed. The air smelled like pine needles and rain, not exhaust and desperation. I found an apartment in a complex called The Willows. It was a second-floor walk-up with beige carpets and a balcony that looked out over a parking lot. But it was mine. The first week, I lived like a ghost. I went to work at the new branch. I introduced myself to my new team, and I went home. I didn't unpack fully. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, but the silence held. On my 10th day in the city, I took a half-day off and went to the county courthouse. I had researched the laws. In this state, a name change was a streamlined process if you had no criminal record and weren't evading law enforcement. I had filled out the paperwork in a library cubicle, my hands steady. I stood before a clerk who looked like she had seen everything and was impressed by nothing. She reviewed my petition. "Reason for name change?" she asked. Not looking up, the form had a box for personal preference. I had checked it. Disassociating from family. I said quietly. She paused. She looked up at me over her reading glasses. For a second, I thought she was going to ask for details, to pry into the sordid history of the Griffins. Instead, she just nodded. $75, she said. I paid in cash. The waiting period was shorter than I expected. When the court order finally came through, signed by a judge I would never meet, I felt a physical shift in my center of gravity. I went to the Social Security office. I went to the DMV. When the plastic ID card arrived in the mail 2 weeks later, I sat on my beige carpet and held it. The photo was me, but the name was different. Lydia Vance. I had kept Lydia. I couldn't part with that. It was the name I had built my degree on, the name I had whispered to myself in the dark to remind myself I existed. But Griffin? Griffin was a debt. Griffin was a heavy stone tied around my neck. Vance was a name I picked from a phone book. It meant nothing to me, which was exactly why it was perfect. It was a blank slate. I stared at the name Lydia Vance next to my face, and I started to cry. It wasn't a cinematic, happy cry. It was a jagged, ugly sobbing that shook my ribs. I wasn't crying because I was happy. I was crying because of the immense, crushing relief. I was crying because I realized that if my father searched for Lydia Griffin in a database next week, I wouldn't be there. I had stepped off the map. I instituted a strict information diet. I told only 2 people where I was. The first was Sarah, my coworker from the old office, the one who had bought me the margarita. She had transferred to a remote role and we stayed in touch via encrypted messaging apps. "You are like a spy," she texted when I sent her a picture of my new view. "I am not a spy," I replied. "I am a refugee." The second person was Mrs. Gable. She was my neighbor in the new complex, a woman in her 70s with arthritic knees and a sharp wit. She had caught me dragging a heavy bookshelf up the stairs on my second day and had insisted on helping me leverage it, teaching me about fulcrums and pivot points. One evening, over tea in her kitchen, she asked me the question I had been dreading. "So, Lydia," she said, pouring hot water into porcelain cups, "why move to Northbridge? You don't have a ring on your finger, and you don't talk about visiting folks back east for the holidays." I looked at her. Mrs. Gable had kind eyes, but they were shrewd. "I needed a fresh start," I said. "My family and we are not in contact." She didn't gasp. She didn't offer platitudes about how blood is thicker than water. She just set the teapot down. "Some trees need to be pruned to survive," she said, "and some just need to be transplanted to different soil entirely." I told her then. Not everything. I didn't tell her about the fraud or the graduation. I just told her that I needed privacy. There's a difference between secrecy and privacy. Mrs. Gable said, "Secrecy is because you are ashamed of what you are hiding. Privacy is because you value what you are protecting." The words settled into my chest. Privacy. I wasn't hiding because I was bad. I was hiding because I was valuable, and I was tired of being looted. The electronic silence didn't last forever. About a month after I left, the emails started. I had changed my phone number, but my personal email address was harder to scrub from the internet. It started with guilt. Subject: Your mother. From Mark Griffin. Lydia, are you serious? Mom is sick with worry. She hasn't slept in 3 days. She thinks you are dead in a ditch somewhere. You need to call her. This isn't funny anymore. I moved it to a folder labeled Archive. I did not reply. Then came the anger. Subject: Ungrateful. From Jerry Griffin. I don't know who you think you are. Running off like a coward. After everything we did for you, we put a roof over your head. We supported you while you played student for 6 years. You are selfish. Lydia, just like you were at graduation, always making it about you. I read it twice. Supported you. I had paid rent to them since I was 18. I had bought my own groceries. The rewriting of history was happening in real time. Then, the bargaining. Subject: Please come home. From Jenna Griffin Lyd. Please, just come home for a weekend. We will have a big dinner. We will celebrate your degree properly this time. Mom bought a cake. We can talk about everything. We miss you. The house feels empty. We can talk about everything. That was the trap. They didn't want to talk. They wanted to negotiate. They wanted to pull me back into the room so they could explain why my reality was wrong and theirs was right. I didn't answer. I deleted the emails. I didn't block them, because I needed to know if they were escalating. But I didn't engage. But then, the Postal Service betrayed me. I had set up mail forwarding for 6 months. Standard procedure when you move. I assumed it would just be junk mail and tax documents. One Tuesday, I came home to find a certified letter notice stuck to my door. I went to the post office the next morning. The clerk handed me a thick, rigid envelope. It had been mailed to my old address, marked urgent, and forwarded to my new PEO box in Northbridge. I opened it in my car. It was from a law firm representing a debt collection agency. Notice of settlement agreement and release. I scanned the document. My heart began to hammer against my ribs like a trapped bird. It was a legal agreement stating that Lydia Griffin acknowledged a debt of $12,000 to a third-party creditor and agreed to a payment plan of $400 a month to avoid litigation. At the bottom of the page was a signature, Lydia Griffin. It looked like my signature. It had the same loop on the L, the same sharp cross on the fa, but it wasn't mine. I hadn't signed this. The date next to the signature was 3 weeks ago. I was already in Northbridge 3 weeks ago. I stared at the paper. This wasn't just taking out a loan. This was a settlement. This was an admission of guilt. Someone, my father, my brother, my sister, had not only stolen my identity to get money, but they were now impersonating me to manage the fallout, signing legal confessions in my name to keep the creditors at bay. They were using me as a shield to hold back the avalanche. I felt a cold rage settle over me. It wasn't the hot, teary anger of graduation day. It was a glacier. I couldn't fix this from Oregon. I couldn't prove I didn't sign this by sending an email. I needed the original. I needed to see the trail. I drove back to my apartment. I told my boss I had a family emergency. The irony tasted like ash in my mouth, and requested 2 days off. I packed a bag. I put a digital voice recorder in my pocket. I put my new driver's license in my wallet. I was going back. I drove the 12 hours back to my home state. I didn't stop for sleep. I drank energy drinks and listened to true crime podcasts, letting the stories of detectives and evidence gathering sharpen my mind. I arrived in my hometown at 10 in the morning on a Thursday. I knew their schedule. My father would be at his part-time consulting gig. My mother would be at her volunteer shift at the library. Jenna would be at work. But Mark? Mark was currently between opportunities. According to the family gossip I had ignored, Mark would be home. I parked my rental car, a gray sedan that looked nothing like my old car, 2 streets over. I walked to the house. The driveway was empty except for Mark's truck. I still had my key. I hadn't mailed it back. I walked up the steps. My heart was beating slow and hard. I slid the key into the lock. It turned. They hadn't changed the locks. Why would they? They probably thought I would come crawling back eventually. I opened the door. The house smelled the same. Lemon polish and stale coffee. It was visceral. A scent that triggered 1,000 memories of being told I was too loud, too quiet, too much. I walked into the kitchen. Mark was sitting at the table, eating cereal. He was wearing boxer shorts and a t-shirt. He looked up. The spoon froze halfway to his mouth. "Lydia?" he said. He stood up, knocking the chair back. He looked terrified. For a split second, he looked like he was seeing a ghost. "Hey, Mark," I said. My voice was steady. I reached into my pocket and clicked the record button on the device. "What are you doing here?" he asked. He looked at the door, then back at me. "Mom said you moved to..." Where was it? Idaho? Oregon. I said. I walked to the table. There was a stack of mail there. I saw envelopes from banks. I saw final notices. I got a letter. "Mark," I said, "a settlement agreement, with my signature on it." Mark's face went pale. He tried to laugh, but it came out as a cough. "Oh, yeah, Dad handled that. It was just paperwork. We are sorting it out. You forged my signature." I said. Mark ran a hand through his hair. "Look, Lydia, don't start. You don't understand the pressure we were under. The bank was going to take the house, literally take the keys. We had no choice. There is always a choice." I said. "You could have sold your truck. You could have gotten a job." "I have a job," he shouted. He was defensive now, the fear turning into aggression. "I am working on my business. But these things take time, and the bank wouldn't wait. Dad said we just needed to leverage your credit for a few months because you weren't using it. It is a victimless crime. Lyd, we are paying it back." I looked at him. "A victimless crime. So you admit it?" I asked. "You admit you signed my name?" Mark threw his hands up. "It was either that or lose the house. What did you want us to do? Be homeless? You are so selfish. You leave. You ghost us. And then you come back here acting like the FBI because we tried to save the family home? It was either that or lose the house. I had it. The admission. I am not selfish." "Mark," I said quietly, "I am just not your collateral anymore." I turned away from him. I walked into the living room. "Hey, where are you going?" Mark yelled. "You can't just walk in here and..." I ignored him. I went to the sideboard where my mother kept the important papers. The drawer was messy. I shuffled through coupons and takeaway menus. I found it. The envelope from graduation day, the one with Lydia written on it. My mother hadn't thrown it away. She kept everything. It was a sickness, a hoarding of memories she could twist later. I opened it. The check was still there. $500. But I looked closer at the memo line. I had seen it briefly that day, but I hadn't analyzed it. Payment 1 of 5. Repayment plan. Repayment. They weren't giving me a gift. They were repaying me with my own money. They had taken the $5,000 loan in my name, and they were giving me $500 back as a gift to keep me quiet, framing it as generosity. I took the envelope. "Put that back," Mark said. He was standing in the doorway now, looking uncertain. He was bigger than me, but he looked small. He looked like a child who had broken a vase and was waiting for his mother to fix it. I walked past him. "Tell Mom I stopped by," I said. I walked out the door. My hands were trembling, but not from fear, from adrenaline. I had one more stop, the storage unit. I knew Jenna had the key to the unit, but I also knew Jenna was lazy. She wouldn't have changed the code again after Rick reset it for me, because that required filling out a form. She would assume I was gone for good. I drove to the facility. I punched in the default code Rick had given me. The gate opened. I drove to Unit 402. I rolled up the door. The boxes were even more scattered than before. They had ransacked it. Clothes were piled on the floor. Books were toppled. They had been looking for the key to the safety deposit box, but they hadn't found the second letter. I knew my grandmother. She was a woman of layers. She hid money in books. She hid keys in picture frames. And if she had a secret, she didn't just write it down once. I went to the back of the unit, where her old sewing machine sat in its case. It was a heavy cast-iron Singer. My mother hated it. She called it junk. She would never look inside it. I unlatched the case. The machine smelled of oil. I felt under the base. There was a small envelope taped to the metal underside. I pulled it loose. I sat on a stack of encyclopedias and opened it. It wasn't a letter to me. It was a contract. It was handwritten, dated 10 years ago. Martha Vance, agreed to loan Jerry and Susan Griffin the sum of $20,000 for the down payment on their home renovation. This loan is interest-free, on the condition that my granddaughter, Lydia Griffin, is never asked to contribute to this debt, nor is her name to be used on any future refinancing. This money is to ensure her security, not yours. It was signed by my grandmother, and below it, signed in blue ink, were the signatures of my parents. Jerry Griffin, Susan Griffin. They had signed it. They had agreed to the condition. They took her money, renovated the house, and then, 10 years later, when the money ran out, they broke the one rule she had set. They had devoured her generosity and then came for mine. I held the paper. This was the smoking gun. This proved that their financial abuse wasn't just desperation. It was a breach of contract. It proved they knew exactly what they were doing. I put the letter in my bag. I put the sewing machine back. I closed the door. I sat in my rental car in the parking lot of the storage facility. The engine was idling. I had everything I needed. I had the credit report. I had the settlement letter with the forgery. I had the recording of Mark admitting they did it to save the house. I had the check with the damning memo line. And I had the grandmother's contract proving a pattern of financial exploitation. I could go to the police right now. I could drive to the precinct and file a report that would likely result in felony charges for my brother and my father. I could destroy them. I could watch them get handcuffed. I could watch the house they were so desperate to save get seized by the state to pay for their legal defense. It would be justice. It would be a revenge story in the classic sense. But as I looked at the gray sky, I realized something. If I filed charges, I would be tied to them for years. There would be hearings. There would be depositions. I would have to see them in court. I would have to listen to my mother cry on the stand. I would be Lydia Griffin, the victim for the next 5 years. I didn't want to be the victim, and I didn't want to be the executioner. I wanted to be Lydia Vance. I wanted to go back to Northbridge. I wanted to help Mrs. Gable in the garden. I wanted to drink margaritas with Sarah. I wanted to do my job and pay my own bills and sleep in a room where no one was calculating my net worth. But I couldn't just walk away. If I walked away now, they would keep doing it. They would keep signing my name. They would keep dragging me under. I needed a lock so heavy they could never break it. I drove to a copy shop. I made 3 copies of everything: the letters, the contract, the settlement. I put the recording on 3 separate USB drives. I put one set in a large envelope. I addressed it to my parents. I put the second set in an envelope addressed to the family attorney, a man named Mr. Henderson who had handled my grandmother's estate. I kept the third set. I drove to the post office. I mailed the envelopes. I didn't write a letter explaining my feelings. I didn't write "I hate you" or "How could you." I just included a single post-it note on top of the stack in the envelope for my parents. I know everything. I have copies of everything. If you ever use my name again, if you ever contact me again, if you ever come looking for me, I will give the 3rd copy to the district attorney. This is your only warning. Goodbye. I walked out of the post office. I got back in my car and drove toward the highway. As I crossed the state line, watching the sign for "Welcome to Oregon" appear in my headlights hours later, I felt the knot in my chest finally unravel. I wasn't running away anymore. I was moving forward. I thought about the graduation. I thought about the empty chair. I thought about the misspelled name. They didn't forget me. I said aloud to the empty car. The realization was final, absolute. They didn't forget me. They chose to erase me. They erased my needs to serve theirs. They erased my identity to save their credit score. They erased my future to pay for their past. But they failed, because I was rewriting the story. And in this version, I didn't save them. I saved myself. The police station in Northbridge was quiet, smelling faintly of floor wax and stale coffee, a scent that now seemed to follow me through every bureaucratic stage of my life. I sat across from Detective Miller, a man with heavy eyelids and a posture that suggested he had spent 30 years listening to people lie. I had placed the folder on his desk. It contained the copies I had made before leaving home: the credit report, the forged settlement agreement, the letter from Mark, and the timeline I had meticulously constructed. "I feel like I am wasting your time," I said. My voice was small. "It is a family matter." Detective Miller looked up from the papers. He adjusted his glasses. "Ms. Vance," he said, using my new name without a blink. "If a stranger stole your credit card and bought a television, would you feel like you were wasting my time?" "No," I said. "If a stranger signed your name to a legal document admitting a debt you did not owe, would you call it a family matter?" "No," I said. "Then stop doing their work for them," he said. He tapped the file with a thick finger. "Identity theft is not a misunderstanding. It is a crime. Forgery is a crime. The fact that the perpetrator shares your DNA just makes it harder to prosecute, not less illegal." I sat back in the hard plastic chair. I felt a flush of heat rise up my neck. It was embarrassment. Deep, burning embarrassment. I felt like a tattletale. I felt like I was betraying the tribe. This was the training. I realized it then. My family had trained me to believe that protecting their secrets was a form of love, and that exposing them was an act of violence. They had installed a button in my brain that flooded me with shame whenever I tried to advocate for myself. "I am filing the report," I said. "I want it on the record." "Good," Miller said. He began typing. "We will forward this to the jurisdiction where the crimes occurred. It establishes a paper trail. If they try to open anything else, this report number is your shield. It tells the creditors that you are a victim, not a participant." I walked out of the station an hour later with a case number printed on a small white card. I tucked it into my wallet next to my new license. It weighed less than a gram, but it felt like I was carrying a sword. 3 days later, the war came to my doorstep. I was at my desk at the Northbridge branch, reviewing shipping manifests for a lumber contract. The office here was open plan, with a glass wall separating the bullpen from the reception area. It was 10 o'clock in the morning on a rainy Tuesday. My desk phone rang. It was Chloe, the receptionist. "Hey, Lydia," she said. Her voice was hushed. "Do we have a Lydia Griffin working here?" My hand froze over the mouse. "No," I said instantly. My heart kicked against my ribs. "Why?" "There is an older couple here. Chloe said. "A man and a woman. They are asking for Lydia Griffin. They say they are her parents, and it is an emergency. They are pretty agitated. The guy is demanding to see the manager." I stood up slowly. I moved toward the coat rack, peering through the gap in the blinds that covered the glass wall. There they were. My father was wearing his windbreaker, the one he wore when he wanted to look busy. My mother was clutching her purse with both hands. Looking around the lobby with frantic, wide eyes, they looked out of place against the sleek gray walls of the office. They looked small. They had found me. They must have called corporate. Or maybe Mark had guessed the transfer location. It didn't matter how. They were here. "Tell them there is no one here by that name." I whispered to Chloe. "Are you sure?" Chloe asked. "They seem really sure she transferred here. I am looking at the employee roster." "Chloe," I said, keeping my voice steady, "we have a Lydia Vance. We do not have a Lydia Griffin. If they continue to cause a disturbance, call security." I watched as Chloe hung up. I watched her smile, her professional, gatekeeper smile. I saw her mouth the words, "I am sorry." My father's face turned red. He slammed his hand on the reception desk. My mother grabbed his arm. They argued with Chloe for another minute. My father pointed a finger at the inner door, the door I was standing 20 feet behind. I stood in the hallway, invisible, for 33 years. I had tried to make them see me. I had waved my grades, my promotions, my degree in their faces, begging them to acknowledge that I was a person of substance, and they had looked right through me. Now, I was finally invisible to them, and it was the most powerful I had ever felt. They couldn't find me because the person they were looking for, Lydia Griffin, the doormat, the bank, the scapegoat, did not exist anymore. She had died in a storage unit in a different state. I watched them turn around and walk out the glass doors into the rain. My father shoved the door open with his shoulder. My mother looked back once, her expression a mix of confusion and fury. I went back to my desk. I sat down. I was shaking, but I didn't stop working. That evening, my phone rang. It wasn't a blocked number. It was a local area code. I assumed it was the pizza delivery driver I had ordered from, asking for gate directions. "Hello?" I answered. "You think you are so smart, don't you?" The voice was ice cold. It was my mother. They must have bought a burner phone with a local number to trick me into answering, or maybe they used an app. "Mom," I said. "Do not mom me," she snapped. "We went to your office. We know you are there. The girl at the front desk is a liar. We drove 12 hours. Lydia, 12 hours to save you from yourself. To save me?" I asked. "Or to save the house?" Silence on the line. Then, the sound of her breathing changed. It became jagged. "How dare you?" she whispered. "After everything we did for you, we raised you. We put food in your mouth. We put clothes on your back. We drove you to soccer practice. We paid for your braces. And this is how you repay us? By running away? By sending us threatening letters?" I listened to the list. It was the same list she always recited. The basic requirements of parenting were presented as a loan that I had defaulted on. I didn't ask to be born. "Mom," I said, "you chose to have a child. Feeding me wasn't charity. It was the law." "You owe us," she screamed. The sound distorted the speaker. "You owe us your loyalty. You owe us your help. We are drowning, Lydia, and you are sitting there with your fancy degree and your new job, watching us sink. You are a monster." I closed my eyes. I pictured the ledger, the mental spreadsheet where they tracked every dollar they spent on me, expecting a return on investment. "I don't owe you my identity." I said, "I don't owe you my credit score. And I certainly don't owe you the right to forge my name." "It was a mistake," she yelled. "We were going to fix it. You didn't call to apologize." I said, "You called to collect. I am done." "Lydia," she said, "if you don't come out and meet us at the motel tonight, if you don't sign the papers to smooth this over with the bank, I am done with you." "I will wash my hands of you. Promise?" I asked. The line went dead. I looked at the phone. I blocked the number. Then I went into my settings and set my phone to do not disturb for everyone except my contacts. I ate my pizza in silence. It tasted like cardboard, but I ate it anyway. I needed the fuel. I couldn't sleep that night. The adrenaline from the call was still coursing through me. I opened my laptop. I had a habit I couldn't break. I checked Mark's online activity. He used the same handle for everything, Griffin King 88. I went to the auction site he used for his side hustles. Usually, he sold car parts or cheap electronics he bought in bulk. I clicked on items for sale. My stomach dropped. There were 12 new listings. Vintage silver tea set. Authentic. Hand-stitched quilt. 1940s. Excellent condition. Pearl brooch. Gold clasp. They were Grandma's things. The tea set she had used for Sunday dinners. The quilt she had made for my mother's wedding. The brooch she had worn to church every Easter. They were selling the history. The prices were low. Desperate prices. Buy it now for $200 for a quilt that was priceless. I realized then that the financial hole was deeper than I had imagined. They weren't just behind on a mortgage payment. They were liquidating the family legacy to keep the lights on. I stared at the screen. I felt a wave of grief crash over me. Not anger. Anger was hot and active. This was cold and heavy. It was the grief of watching a house burn down and knowing you couldn't use your own water to put it out, because the fire would consume you too. I hovered my mouse over the Buy It Now button for the quilt. I could buy it. I could save it. I pulled my hand back. If I bought it, they would see the shipping name. Or if I used a proxy, I was still giving them money. I was still feeding the beast. I closed the laptop. I let the quilt go. It was just fabric. The memory of my grandmother was not in the fabric. It was in the letters she had left me. It was in the truth she had told me. The next morning, an email arrived that changed the landscape of the battlefield. It was from Carol. Davis mail, calm, Aunt Carol, my father's sister. Carol was the quiet one. She lived 2 towns over from my parents. She came to Thanksgiving, ate quietly, complimented the turkey, and left early. We had never had a real conversation. Subject: regarding your grandmother. I opened it. Dear Lydia, I heard through the family grapevine that you have left. I also heard Jerry shouting about lawyers and ungrateful daughters. I suspect I know why. I kept my mouth shut for a long time because I'm afraid of your father's temper. I am ashamed of that, but I watched how they treated you. I saw them take the money Mom left for your college and use it for the kitchen remodel. I said nothing. I cannot say nothing anymore. Attached is a scan of a document Mom gave me 6 months before she died. She was worried. She said she didn't trust Jerry to handle the final trust execution. She asked me to keep a copy, just in case. I think this is the case. Be safe. Aunt Carol. I clicked the attachment. It was a PDF. It was a copy of a trust addendum. The property situated at 440 Lakeview Drive and the accompanying savings account ending in 9908 are to be held in trust for Lydia Griffin, to be transferred upon her 30th birthday or her graduation from university, whichever comes later. The trustee, Jerry Griffin, shall not access these funds for any personal use. My heart hammered. 440 Lakeview Drive. That was the small cabin my grandmother owned. My parents had told me it was sold to pay for her funeral expenses. They had cried about it. They said the market was bad and they barely broke even. It hadn't been sold. Or if it had, the money belonged to me, and the account, ending in 9908. I looked at the date on the document. It was legally notarized. My parents hadn't just stolen my credit. They had embezzled my inheritance. They had looked me in the eye for 3 years since I turned 30 and lied every single day. I wasn't just a daughter to them. I was a bank account they hadn't finished draining. I didn't go to legal aid this time. I went to a specialist. I found a firm in Northbridge that specialized in probate litigation and fraud. I took $5,000 from my savings, the money I had hoarded for a rainy day, and put it on the retainer. The attorney was a woman named Ms. Cheng. She was sharp, precise, and expensive. I sat in her office, which overlooked the river. I showed her the aunt's email. I showed her the trust document. I showed her the credit report. This is significant. Ms. Chung said. She tapped the trust document. If this property was sold, we need to trace the proceeds. If your father was the trustee and he self-dealt, that is a breach of fiduciary duty. It is civilly actionable and potentially criminally fraudulent. I just want my name cleared. I said, I want the debt off my record, and I want to know if the cabin is gone. We can find out, she said. I will file a petition for an accounting of the trust. We will subpoena the bank records. We will pull the real estate transfer deeds. She looked at me. Lydia, she said, if we do this, we are lighting a match. Your family will not react well. They are already cornered. This will make them desperate. They are already desperate. I said, I just want to know the truth. I want to know exactly how much I was worth to them. The reaction was swift. But it wasn't legal. It was social. 2 days after Ms. Chung sent the demand letter to my parents, my phone started blowing up with notifications. But not texts, social media tags. I didn't have Facebook anymore. But Sarah did. She texted me a screenshot. Jenna Griffin posted an update. The image was a photo of me from high school. I looked young, vulnerable. The caption read, "Please pray for my sister Lydia. She has been going through a severe mental health crisis. She has cut off all contact with the family and has run away to Oregon. We are so worried she is not in her right mind. She is making up terrible stories about us. If anyone sees her, please tell her we love her and just want her to get help." Mental health awareness. Missing. I stared at the screen. My hands went cold. They were painting me as crazy. It was the ultimate defense. If I was mentally unstable, then my accusations about the money were just delusions. If I was having a breakdown, then my name change was just a symptom of my illness. They were weaponizing concern to discredit me before the truth came out. Sarah sent another text. Lydia, people at work are seeing this. One of the drivers just asked me if you were okay. They think you are having a psychotic break. Panic constricted my throat. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I stood up in my kitchen and paced. They were going to ruin my reputation. They were going to make me unhireable. They were going to follow me here and destroy the new life I was building. Breathe. I told myself, this is a tactic. It is noise. I went to the sink and splashed cold water on my face. I could reply. I could post a status saying, I am not crazy. My family are thieves. I could post the police report number. I could post the forged check. But that was what they wanted. They wanted a mud fight. They wanted to drag me down into the dirt where they lived. Because in the dirt, all the details get muddy. Rule 2. No arguing with lies. I dried my face. I sat down at my laptop. I composed a message. I did not post it on Facebook. I sent it directly to Jenna, Mark, and my parents via email. To the Griffin family, I am aware of the public posts you are making regarding my mental health. You will remove them immediately. I am not missing. I am not unwell. I am employed, safe, and represented by counsel. If you contact my employer again, or if you continue to post defamatory statements about my medical status to the public, I will instruct my attorney to add a claim for defamation and tortious interference to the fraud lawsuit we are preparing. Do not contact me directly. All future communication must be directed to the law office of Chung Associates. Lydia Vance. I hit send. I didn't ask. I commanded. 10 minutes later, Sarah texted me. The post is down. I let out a breath I had been holding for an hour. They were bullies, and like all bullies, they panicked when the target didn't cry, but instead pulled out a bigger stick. That night, the silence in my apartment felt different. It wasn't the silence of hiding. It was the silence of a fortress. I made tea. I sat on my balcony wrapped in a blanket, listening to the rain hit the pavement. I opened the recipe box. I took out the letters from my grandmother. I read the one she had written for my 30th birthday, the one I had missed because they hid it. My darling Lydia, you have a heart that wants to give. That is your best quality, but it is also your danger. You think love means making yourself smaller so others can feel big. I hope by the time you read this, you have learned that you can be big too. I am leaving you the cabin because it was the only place I ever felt like myself. Away from the noise of this family. I want you to have a place where you can hear your own voice. I traced the ink with my finger. My parents had stolen the cabin. I knew that now. Ms. Chung would confirm it soon. They had sold my sanctuary. But as I sat there in the cool Oregon air, looking at the lights of a city that didn't know my old name, I realized something. They stole the asset. But they couldn't steal the intent. My grandmother had seen me. She had looked at the family dynamic, the grasping father, the enabling mother, the golden child brother, and she had seen Lydia. She had seen that I needed protection. She had seen that I needed an escape hatch. The money didn't matter. I could earn money. I was good at my job. I was resilient. What mattered was the validation. For 30 years, I thought I was the problem. I thought I was the difficult one, the selfish one, the drama queen. But the woman who started this family, the matriarch they all claimed to revere, she had known the truth. She had put it in writing. You can be big too. I looked out at the dark trees swaying in the wind. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't ungrateful. I was just the only one who had refused to play the role they wrote for me. I folded the letter and put it back in the box. Let them sell the silver. Let them lie to the neighbors. Let them scramble in the trap they built for themselves. I had the truth, and for tonight, that was enough. Ms. Chung placed the document on the polished mahogany desk with the precision of a surgeon laying out a scalpel. It was a high-resolution copy of the debt settlement agreement, the one that had bound me to pay $12,000 I had never borrowed. Look at the notary stamp, Ms. Chung said. I leaned in. The stamp was standard. Black ink, a circle containing a name and an expiration date. Gregory Tate. Commission expires. June 2027. Now look at the identification details recorded in the notary log. Ms. Chung said. She slid a second piece of paper over the first. Type of ID. Driver's license. Number ending in 452. I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. That is my old license number. I said, I renewed it 2 years ago. The new one ends in 890. Exactly, Ms. Chung said. If a stranger had stolen your wallet today, they would have used your current ID. This was done by someone who had access to your old records. Someone who likely had a photocopy of your expired license in a filing cabinet. She paused, watching me closely. Our investigator ran a background check on the notary. Gregory Tate. He is a senior processing agent at a firm called Valley DocuPrep. It is a small office in your hometown that handles title transfers and debt consolidations. I stared at the name, Gregory Tate. It took a moment for the connection to fire in my brain, because in my family, he was just Greg. He was the quiet, soft-spoken man who stood by the barbecue at 4th of July parties, holding a beer and nodding while my father lectured him about lawn care. Greg was my sister's husband. I felt the air leave the room. Greg works there? I asked. I realized how little I knew about my brother-in-law. I knew he worked in administration, a vague term that allowed my parents to ignore him. I never asked for details. He does, Ms. Chung said. And according to the timestamp on the digital file, this document was processed at 7 in the evening on a Tuesday, after business hours. The picture snapped into focus, sharp and ugly. It wasn't just my parents. It wasn't just Mark. It was a full family operation. Jenna knew. Jenna had to know. She had asked her husband to use his professional stamp to validate a forgery, using an old photocopy my mother had pulled from the archives. They had turned my identity theft into a family project. I needed to see her. I didn't want to see my parents. I wasn't ready to look at Mark. But Jenna? Jenna. Who had called me crying about the frozen account to distract me? Jenna. Who had told me to just focus on walking while they robbed me? I needed to look her in the eye. I flew back the next day. I told no one I was coming except Ms. Cheng, who arranged for a process server to be on standby. I texted Jenna from a burner number Miss Cheng provided. Meet me at the coffee shop on 3rd Street. 1 hour. Come alone. If you don't show up, my lawyer files the lawsuit against Greg this afternoon. She showed up in 40 minutes. I sat in a booth at the back of the shop, watching the door. When Jenna walked in, she looked 10 years older than she had at graduation. Her shoulders were hunched, and she was wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky. She looked around nervously, like a celebrity avoiding paparazzi, or a criminal avoiding the police. She saw me and froze. Then she walked over and slid into the booth opposite me. She didn't take off her sunglasses. "Lydia," she whispered. I didn't say hello. I folded my hands on the table. "I know about Greg." I said. Jenna flinched as if I had thrown hot coffee on her. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "I know he works at Valley DocuPrep." I continued, my voice low and even. "I know he notarized the forgery using my old license. That is a felony. Jenna, for him and for you." Jenna crumbled. It wasn't a slow dissolve. It was a collapse. She put her head in her hands and started to sob, a jagged, desperate sound that made the barista look over. "I am sorry," she choked out. "I am so sorry." "Lydia, why?" I asked. It was the only question that mattered. Not how, but why. Why did my sister, who I used to share a room with, who I used to cover for when she snuck out in high school, agree to destroy me? Jenna wiped her nose with the back of her hand. "Mom and Dad told us they were going to lose the house," she said. "They were frantic. They said if they lost the house, they wouldn't be able to help us anymore. They pay for the kids' preschool. Lydia, they pay for Greg's car lease. We live paycheck to paycheck. If they cut us off, we go under." "So you sacrificed me to save your car lease?" I asked. "No," Jenna said, looking up. Her eyes were red and swollen. "It wasn't like that. Dad said it was just a bridge loan. He said he would pay it back in 3 months. He said you would never even know." She reached across the table, trying to take my hand. I pulled back. "Lydia, listen," she said, her voice dropping to a plead. Honestly, we figured you would be fine. You have the degree now. You have the big job. You are the strong one. You always land on your feet. Even if you found out, we thought you could handle it. We thought you could absorb the hit better than we could." I stared at her. There it was. The banal, wretched truth. There was no grand villainy. There was no hatred. It was just convenience. I was the load-bearing wall of the family, and they had chipped away at my foundation because they assumed I would never collapse. My competence was their permission slip. Because I was responsible, I was punishable. Because I could handle it. They decided I should handle it. I looked at my sister, and I didn't see a monster. I saw a weak, frightened woman who had sold her integrity for tuition payments. "It is almost worse," I said softly, "that you didn't do it because you hate me. You did it because I was the path of least resistance. Please, Lydia," Jenna whispered. "Greg will lose his license. He will lose his job. Please don't file the suit." I stood up. I placed a $5 bill on the table for my black coffee. "You should have thought about that before you signed my name," I said. I walked out. I didn't look back at her sobbing in the booth. I felt a strange, hollow sensation in my chest. It wasn't triumph. It was the realization that I had been an orphan for a long time. I just hadn't noticed because the room was so crowded. My parents tried a different tactic. 2 hours after I left Jenna, my phone rang. It was my father. I let it go to voicemail. Then, a text. "We know you are in town," Jenna told us. "Stop this nonsense with the lawyers. Come to dinner tonight. We will make your favorite, pot roast. We need to close this chapter and move on as a family." Close the chapter, as if my identity theft was a book they had finished reading and were bored with. I replied, "I will not meet you for dinner. I will meet you tomorrow at 9 in the morning at the offices of Chung Associates. If you want to talk, you will do it on the record." They showed up at 8:55. The conference room was all glass and chrome, a stark contrast to the cluttered, emotional warmth of my childhood kitchen. My parents sat on one side of the wide table. I sat on the other, flanked by Ms. Chung and a court reporter. My mother looked haggard. Her hair was not done. She wore a cardigan that looked too big for her. My father looked furious, his jaw set in a tight line. This is ridiculous. My father spat as soon as the door closed. Bringing us here? Dragging your mother through this? We are your parents. Lydia, not criminals. Ms. Chung opened a file. We have evidence of forgery. Mr. Griffin, we have evidence of fraud involving the grandmother's trust. We have evidence of conspiracy. My father waved a hand, dismissing the stack of paper as if it were a fly. We borrowed money, he shouted, from our own daughter. Since when is that a crime? We were going to pay it back, without her consent. Ms. Chung said calmly, that is theft. My father turned his eyes on me. They were dark, hard eyes. You are enjoying this, aren't you? He said. You are sitting there, cold as ice, watching us squirm. You have always been like this. Lydia. Cold, unfeeling. You care more about your precious rules and your credit score than you do about human beings. I looked at him. I remembered the graduation. I remembered him sitting at the restaurant, laughing, while I sat alone in a gymnasium. I remembered him looking at me in the kitchen and telling me I was making a scene. I am not cold. Dad, I said, I am exhausted. You are vindictive. He said, you are trying to punish us because we missed your little ceremony. That is what this is about, isn't it? You are throwing a tantrum because we didn't clap for you. I took a deep breath. I felt the vibration of his anger in the air. But it didn't penetrate me. I was behind bulletproof glass now. I am not angry you missed my graduation. I said, I am not even angry you forgot me. I leaned forward. I am doing this because you stole from me. You stole my name. You stole my grandmother's legacy. And you are not angry that I left. Dad, you are angry that you can't use me anymore. You are angry that the ATM is out of order. The room went silent. My father's face turned a mottled purple. He opened his mouth to scream, but my mother put a hand on his arm. Jerry, stop, she whispered. She looked at me. Her eyes were wet. Lydia, please, she said. We are family. That word again, family. It was a weapon. It was a hostage negotiation tactic. I stood up. Ms. Chung will handle the rest, I said. I walked out of the room. I heard my father shouting my name, but the heavy soundproofing of the door cut him off as soon as it clicked shut. The investigation into the trust unearthed the final betrayal. Ms. Chung subpoenaed the hospital records and the bank transfer logs. The timeline was damning. 3 days before my grandmother died, while she was in the palliative care unit receiving high doses of morphine, a document was signed. It was an amendment to her living trust. It removed the specific bequest of the cabin and the savings account to me, and instead rolled all assets into the general estate, with my father named as the sole executor with full discretion. We deposed the nurse who was on duty that night. She remembered. She remembered because my father had been insistent on going into the room alone. Claiming he needed a private goodbye, he had stayed for 20 minutes. When he came out, he had a folder. I called Aunt Carol. She was confused that week. Aunt Carol told me over the phone. Her voice was trembling. She didn't know who I was. She thought she was back in 1950. There is no way she understood what she was signing. Lydia. No way. My father had taken a woman on her deathbed, his own mother, and guided her hand to sign away her final gift to me. He had looked at her dying body and seen one last opportunity to secure his own comfort. Ms. Chung filed a petition to invalidate the amendment based on lack of capacity and undue influence. The moment the filing hit the court docket, the facade cracked wide open. My phone, which I had unblocked for the attorneys, began to buzz incessantly. First came the begging. Mom, Lydia, please withdraw the petition. If the court freezes the assets, we can't pay the mortgage. We will lose the house for real this time. Then the threats. Dad, you are destroying this family. If you proceed with this, I will sue you for elder abuse. I will tell everyone you harassed a dying woman. Then the love bombing. Mark. Lyd. Remember when we used to build forts in the living room? We were a team. Don't do this. We love you. We can fix this. I didn't reply to any of them. I took screenshots. I forwarded every single text to Ms. Chung. Document everything, she had said. So I did. I created a digital archive of their desperation. It was a tragic, ugly museum of a family collapsing under the weight of its own lies. Then Mark asked to meet. He reached out through Ms. Cheng. He said he wanted to offer a settlement. I agreed to a phone call, with lawyers present on the line. Lydia, Mark said. He sounded tired. His bravado was gone. What is the offer? Mark, I asked. I will take the fall, he said. I waited. I will sign a statement saying I stole the ID, he said. I will say, I forged the documents without Mom and Dad knowing. I will say I pressured Grandma. I will take the rap for everything. And what do I have to do? I asked. Drop the civil suit against Mom and Dad, he said. And don't file the police report on the trust. Just let them keep the house. Let them retire in peace. Put it all on me. I can handle it. I don't have a big career like you. It won't matter if I have a record. I listened to him. I heard the echo of the golden child trying to tarnish himself to save the kingdom. But it wasn't noble. It was just another manipulation. He was trying to bargain with justice. He wanted to keep the secrets. He wanted to maintain the lie that our parents were innocent victims of a wayward son. Rather than the architects of the scheme, if I agreed, I would be participating in another lie. I would be helping them rewrite reality again. I can't do that. Mark, I said. Why not? He asked, his voice rising. It gives you what you want. You get your name cleared. You get the debt wiped. Because it isn't true, I said. I chose the new urge, the urge for honesty. I am not going to help you lie for them anymore. I said. I hung up. I returned to Northbridge. The legal battle was a slow, grinding machine now. It moved in motions and briefings and depositions. It became background noise, a hum of anxiety that I learned to tune out. I began to build a life that wasn't centered on the fight. I joined a running club that met on Tuesday nights by the river. I was slow, and my lungs burned, but I liked the rhythm of it. One foot in front of the other, forward motion. I met a woman named Sarah, a different Sarah, who worked in marketing. We bonded over a shared hatred of mismatched fonts. We started getting coffee on Sundays. I told her a little bit. I told her I was estranged from my family. I told her there was a lawsuit. She didn't ask for details. She just nodded and said, "That sucks. Do you want a pastry?" It was a small, unremarkable friendship, and it felt like a miracle. I started dating, cautiously. I went to dinner with a man named David, a teacher with kind eyes and ink stains on his fingers. He asked about my family on the second date. We are not close. I said, it is complicated. He didn't push. He just poured more wine and told me about his unruly third graders. I realized that I didn't have to be a tragedy. I didn't have to wear my trauma like a coat. I could just be Lydia Vance, the woman who liked running and supply chain logistics and red wine. One night, looking in the mirror, I heard the old voice in my head. You are difficult. You are causing trouble. I looked at my reflection. I looked at the lines around my eyes. No. I thought, I am allowed. I am allowed to keep my money. I am allowed to keep my name. I am allowed to protect my peace. As the months passed and the case moved toward a trial date, a quiet, wrenching question began to take shape in the back of my mind. If I won, and Ms. Chung was confident I would get the cabin back. I would get the debt erased. I would be vindicated. But I would also permanently sever the last thread. If I won, my parents would likely lose their home to pay the judgment. My brother might face charges. My sister's husband would lose his career. I would be the wrecking ball. There would be no Christmas dinners, no awkward birthday calls, no possibility of them ever waking up and realizing they loved me. If I won, I would be officially, legally, permanently alone. I sat on my floor with the recipe box. I thought about the family I wanted, the family that cheered at graduations, the family that protected each other. I realized then that I wasn't grieving the loss of my family. I was grieving the loss of the hope that they would ever be that family. I was killing the fantasy. The grief was real. It was heavy and sharp. But as I sat there, tracing the wood grain of the box, I knew that the fantasy was already dead. They had killed it the day they drove to the lakeside restaurant instead of my graduation. They had killed it the day they signed my name to a lie. I wasn't severing a limb. I was removing gangrene. I closed the box. I was ready for the end. The conference room was neutral ground, a space designed to strip away emotion and leave only the dry bones of the law. The walls were a pale, inoffensive gray, the carpet a muted industrial weave that smelled of vacuum cleaner dust and unresolved conflict. I sat on one side of the long oval table, flanked by Ms. Chung and a junior associate who was furiously taking notes. On the other side sat the Griffin family. My father was wearing his Sunday suit, the one he usually reserved for weddings and funerals. It looked tight across the shoulders, a physical manifestation of his tension. My mother sat next to him, clutching a tissue in her hand like a talisman. Mark and Jenna were there too, looking like children who had been called to the principal's office. Sullen and terrified in equal measure, the mediator, a retired judge named Mr. Harrison, sat at the head of the table. He shuffled his papers, the sound loud in the heavy silence. "We are here to resolve the matter of Vance versus Griffin, regarding allegations of identity theft, fraud, and the dispute over the estate of Martha Vance," he said. He looked up over his reading glasses. My parents flinched. It wasn't the legal terms that hit them. It was the name, Vance. They knew I had changed it. Ms. Chang had sent them the notification, but seeing it on the docket, hearing a stranger use it to define me, was different. It was a reality they could not argue with. To them, names were ownership. I was a Griffin. I belonged to the clan. I belonged to the debt. By becoming a Vance, I had not just moved away. I had removed myself from the inventory. I watched my mother's face. Her eyes darted to me, then to the nameplate in front of me. There was panic there. It was the look of a person reaching for a familiar tool and finding the toolbox empty. She realized, perhaps for the first time, that she could not call on Lydia Griffin to fix this. Lydia Griffin was dead. "Mr. Harrison continued, "We have a significant amount of ground to cover. We will begin with the allegations of forgery regarding the debt settlement with quick cash lenders." My mother let out a small, strangled sob. "This is all a misunderstanding," she said. Her voice was trembling, pitched to induce sympathy. "We never meant to hurt anyone. It was a miscommunication. We thought Lydia would want to help. We are a family. We share burdens." She looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears that looked practiced. "Lydia, honey," she said, "please, we made a mistake with the dates. We got confused. We thought you gave us permission during that phone call in April. Don't you remember? You said you wanted to help." I sat perfectly still, under the table. My hands were folded in my lap, my thumbs pressing against each other to keep them steady. I did not speak. I nodded to Ms. Chang. Ms. Chang slid a single sheet of paper across the table. "This is a timeline of events," Ms. Chang said, her voice crisp and devoid of sentiment. I watched my father pick it up. May 1st. Ms. Chung recited, "Lydia sends a graduation reminder." May 12th. "A loan is opened in Lydia's name at Quick Cash Lenders." May 12th. "Jenna Griffin accesses Lydia's storage unit." May 15th. "The Griffin family fails to attend graduation." May 15th. "A check is written to Lydia with the memo line referencing a repayment plan." June 1st. "A settlement agreement is signed with a forged signature using an expired license number." Ms. Chung paused. "There is no phone call in April where my client consented to a $5,000 loan." She said, "There is, however, a paper trail of deliberate concealment. You didn't ask for help. You took it, and then you tried to cover it up with a fake gift and a misspelled name on an envelope." My mother looked at the paper. The tears stopped. The facts were immune to her emotional frequency. She couldn't cry away a timestamp. She couldn't gaslight a bank record. "But we love her," my mother burst out. She turned to the mediator. "We love our daughter. We were under so much stress. You have to understand. Your Honor, the bank was calling every day. We were terrified. We just needed a stopgap." Mr. Harrison looked at her, his face impassive. Stress is not a legal defense for forgery. Mrs. Griffin, he said. He turned a page in his file. Which brings us to the second matter, he said, the trust of Martha Vance. My father stiffened. He sat up straighter, buttoning his jacket as if to armor himself. That is a separate issue. My father said, that is a state law. It has nothing to do with this credit nonsense. My mother changed her mind. She had the right to change her mind. Mr. Harrison looked at a document in front of him. We have reviewed the amendment signed 3 days before her death, he said, and we have flagged it for further judicial review. Why? My father demanded. It was notarized. It was notarized, Mr. Harrison agreed. But the witness statements are inconsistent. One witness claims to have been in the room, while the hospital visitation logs show that witness was not checked in until 2 hours after the time of signing. Furthermore, the administrator's notes from the nursing station mention that you, Mr. Griffin, were observed arguing with the patient earlier that day, and that you pressured the staff to allow you private time to finalize paperwork quickly. The room went deadly silent. The air conditioner hummed. I could hear the scratching of the junior associate's pen. I looked at my father. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the table, his face turning a deep, mottled red. You pressured a dying woman, I said softly. My father's head snapped up. I did what I had to do, he shouted. The explosion was sudden and violent. He slammed his hand on the table, making the water pitcher jump. You think you know everything, Lydia? You think you are so high and mighty with your degree and your clean hands? You have no idea what it costs to run this family. He pointed a shaking finger at me. Your grandmother was going to give that cabin to you. He spat. To you. A single girl with a good job. You didn't need it. We needed it. Mark needed it. Jenna needed it. I am the head of this family. It was my responsibility to make sure the assets went where they were needed, not where some senile old woman thought they should go. He admitted it. He admitted he overruled his mother's dying wish because he decided I didn't need my inheritance. He decided my stability was a surplus he was entitled to redistribute. And the graduation? I asked. I needed to know. I needed to hear it from them. Here, in this room of truth. Why did you miss it? I asked. The restaurant photo? The calamari? Why? My father opened his mouth to lie. I saw the fabrication forming on his lips. Something about traffic. Something about a flat tire. But Mark spoke first. It was the bank. Mark said. His voice was a low mumble. He was staring at his shoes. Shut up. Mark, my father hissed. No, Mark said. He looked up. He looked tired. He looked like the weight of being the golden child had finally crushed his spine. The meeting with the loan officer was at 10 in the morning on Saturday. Mark said to me, it was the only time they could see us to stop the foreclosure process. If we didn't sign the restructuring deal by noon, they were going to put the lockbox on the door on Monday. I stared at him. 10 in the morning. The exact time I was walking across the stage. We had to choose, Mark said. We couldn't be in two places. And Mom said you would understand. He looked at me, pleading for absolution. We went to the restaurant afterwards because we were relieved. Mark said, we saved the house. Lydia, we were celebrating that we weren't going to be homeless. We didn't do it to hurt you. We thought you were strong enough to handle being alone for one day. We figured you would get over it. I felt a physical blow to my chest. It wasn't pain. It was the impact of absolute clarity. They didn't forget. They traded me. They weighed my graduation against their house. And the house won. That was understandable. But they didn't call me. They didn't tell me. They let me sit there in that gymnasium, scanning the crowd, feeling unloved, because telling me would have been inconvenient. They needed me to be the easy child, the child who demanded nothing, the child who would understand later. You didn't celebrate saving the house, I said. My voice was steady, clearer than it had ever been. You celebrated Mark's promotion on social media. You lied to the world. We had to, Mark cried. We couldn't tell people we were broke. So you erased me to save your image, I said. I looked at Jenna. And you? I asked. You knew about the meeting? Jenna nodded. She was crying again, silent tears tracking through her makeup. Greg helped with the paperwork for the restructuring. She whispered, "That is why he accessed your records. We needed your credit profile to show the bank that the family had backup assets. He didn't mean to commit a crime. Lydia, he was trying to save Mom and Dad. He forged my signature." I said, "He had good intentions," Jenna wailed. "He is a good man." I looked at her. I looked at the sister who had stood by and watched me be cannibalized to feed the family ego. "Intent doesn't erase impact," I said. The words landed like thunder in the small room. "It doesn't matter that you wanted to save the house." I said, "It matters that you stole my name to do it. It matters that you made me a victim of a crime so you could keep your comfort. You don't get credit for good intentions when the result is my destruction." The silence that followed was heavy and final. There were no more excuses. The misunderstanding was dead. The love was exposed as a system of control. "Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. "I think we have heard enough to proceed with the settlement agreement." He said, "The negotiation that followed was sharp, surgical, and devoid of warmth. There was no hugging. There was no tearful reconciliation. There was only the scratching of pens and the shuffling of legal briefs. The terms were clear. First, the debt settlement with quick cash lenders was declared void due to fraud. My parents accepted full liability for the debt. My name was removed. Second, a formal statement was signed by my parents and Mark admitting to the unauthorized use of my identity. This document would be sealed unless they violated the agreement, in which case I could hand it to the district attorney. It was my insurance policy. Third, a permanent protective order was put in place. They were not to contact me, my employer, or my associates. They were not to use my name or my image on social media. The trust issue was the only loose end. Mr. Harrison ordered it to be moved to probate court for a full audit. Given the evidence of undue influence, that battle would continue, but it would be fought by lawyers, not by daughters. When the final signature was dried, I stood up. My mother looked at me. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. She looked like a woman who had woken up in a house she didn't recognize. "Lydia," she whispered. I gathered my files. I put my pen in my bag. "It is Ms. Vance," I said. I turned and walked out of the conference room. I walked out of the building and into the late afternoon sun. The air in the parking lot was warm and smelled of asphalt and exhaust. I stood by my rental car and took a deep breath. I had expected to feel victorious. I had expected to feel a surge of triumph, the cinematic moment where the hero stands over the defeated villain, but I didn't feel triumph. I felt space. It was a strange sensation. My chest felt open. My head felt clear. It was like walking into a room that had been filled with screaming noise for 30 years. And suddenly, someone had cut the power. The silence wasn't lonely. It was spacious. I realized then that this wasn't revenge. Revenge is about making the other person hurt. This was about making myself free. I wasn't holding a trophy. I was holding a key to a door I had just locked from the outside. "Lydia?" I turned. It was Aunt Carol. She had been waiting in her car. She must have known the mediation was today. She walked over to me. She looked nervous, clutching her purse. I saw them go in. She said, she gestured toward the building. "Your father looked like he swallowed a lemon." I smiled. A small, genuine smile. "It is over, Aunt Carol," I said, "or mostly over." She nodded. She reached into her large tote bag and pulled out a small, velvet box. It was dusty. The velvet was worn at the corners. "I saved this," she said. "Mom gave it to me about a month before she passed. She made me promise to hide it. She said Jerry would pawn it if he found it. She handed me the box. She wanted you to have it on your graduation day." Aunt Carol said, "She knew she wouldn't be there, but she wanted you to know she was watching." I took the box. My hands were trembling. I opened it. Inside was a vintage gold watch. It was delicate, with a small square face and a leather band. It wasn't flashy. It was timeless. Under the watch was a small, folded piece of paper. I unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky. The script of a woman whose hands were failing her but whose mind was sharp. For Lydia. Time is the only thing that is truly yours. Don't let them spend it for you. Finish what you started. Love, Grandma. I stood in the parking lot of a legal center, surrounded by strangers and cars, and I broke. I cried. I cried for the graduation I sat alone at. I cried for the little girl who tried so hard to be good, so they would love her. I cried for the grandmother who had seen me clearly when no one else did. Aunt Carol put a hand on my shoulder. She didn't say anything. She just let me weep. Finish what you started. I wiped my eyes. I put the watch on my wrist. It fit perfectly. I looked at Aunt Carol. Thank you, I said. You look like her. Aunt Carol said, you have her chin and her stubbornness. I hugged her. It was a fierce, tight hug. I got in my car. I looked at the building one last time. Then I put the car in drive and turned toward the highway. I had a flight to catch. I had a job to do. I had a run club on Tuesday. I was going home, to Northbridge. That night, I was back in my apartment in Oregon. It was midnight. The rain was tapping against the glass. I was unpacking my bag when my phone buzzed. It shouldn't have buzzed. I had blocked them all. But grief is resourceful. It was a message from an unknown number. But I knew who it was. I opened it. It was a photo, a grainy, scanned image from a disposable camera. It was me, age 5, sitting on the front porch of the house. I was wearing a sundress. My knees were scraped. I was smiling up at the camera, my hands full of dandelions I had picked from the lawn. Below the photo, there was a caption in all caps, "Come home." I stared at the screen. I felt a wave of nausea roll through my stomach. It was physical, a sickness. But mixed with the nausea was a sharp, piercing tenderness. I looked at that little girl. I remembered that day. I remembered bringing the dandelions to my mother. I remembered her putting them in a jar of water. I remembered thinking that if I just picked enough flowers, if I was just sweet enough, the house would be happy. Come home. It wasn't an invitation. It was a command. It was a hook. It was the terrifying, seductive pull of the familiar. They were offering me the rollback. I could go back. I could apologize. I could pay the debt. I could be the daughter again. I could have the Sunday dinners and the pot roast and the illusion of belonging. All I had to do was surrender my reality. I looked at the gold watch on my wrist. Time is the only thing that is truly yours. I looked at the message. I recognized it for what it was. It wasn't love. It was control wrapped in the skin of love. They didn't miss me. They missed the version of me that complied. I didn't delete the photo. I saved it. I saved it to the folder labeled Evidence. I didn't reply. I walked to the window and looked out at the dark shapes of the fir trees. I was alone in a city where I knew almost no one. I had a legal bill that would take me 2 years to pay off. I had a family that viewed me as a traitor. But the air in the room was mine. The quiet was mine. The name on the lease was mine. I turned off the phone. I placed it face down on the table. I went into the bedroom and turned off the light. I was Lydia Vance, and I was finally, completely awake. Thank you for listening to this story. It was a journey into the difficult, often silent world of family estrangement and the fight for one's own identity. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Please leave a comment below sharing your city or country. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more narratives about justice, resilience, and the complexities of human relationships, please subscribe to Revenge Stories. And finally, I invite you to share your thoughts in English in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between your peace and your family? How did you handle it? Let's start a conversation.